Ever wonder what happens when you finally get the chance to confront the person who broke your heart and shattered your trust? What if I told you I not only confronted them, but I got my ultimate revenge? Stick around to hear the full unbelievable story of how I turned my pain into vindication. My name is Catalina, and 3 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Picture this, a cozy apartment in downtown Phoenix, a promising career as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup, and what I believed was the love of my life, Trevor Harrison. Trevor was everything I thought I wanted in a man. 6'2" with those piercing blue eyes that could make you forget your own name. He drove a sleek black Mustang and had this confidence that drew people to him like moths to a flame. We'd been together for 2.5 years, and honestly, I was already picking out wedding dresses in my head. Our relationship felt like something out of a romantic movie. Trevor would surprise me with weekend trips to Sedona, candlelit dinners at Romano's Italian Bistro, and those little love notes he'd leave in my purse before work. He had this way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the world when he looked at me. I remember the night everything started to unravel, though I didn't know it then. We were at my best friend Sophia's housewarming party in Scottsdale. Trevor seemed different that night, distracted, constantly checking his phone. When I asked him about it, he just smiled that charming smile and said work was being crazy demanding. "Baby, you know how Johnson and Associates gets during merger season," he said, pulling me closer on Sophia's cream-colored sofa. "Once this deal closes, I'll be all yours again." I believed him. God, I was so naive. The signs were there, looking back. The late nights at the office that stretched later and later. The way he'd angle his phone away from me when texting. How he suddenly became interested in working out at a new gym across town instead of our usual place near my apartment. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? I explained away every red flag, every gut feeling, every moment when something felt off. When my sister Carmen visited from Denver and mentioned that Trevor seemed different somehow, I defended him fiercely. "He's just stressed about work," I told her over coffee at our favorite cafe on Mill Avenue. "You don't know him like I do." The irony of that statement still makes my stomach turn. Trevor and I had started talking about moving in together. We'd spend Sunday mornings at IHOP, sharing stacks of blueberry pancakes while browsing apartment listings on his laptop. He'd point to these gorgeous places with mountain views and promise that soon we'd wake up together every morning, watching the sunrise over the desert. "Just imagine, Kat," he'd say, using the nickname that made my heart skip. "Our own place, our own life. No more driving across town to see each other." I was so ready for that next step. I'd already started collecting things for our future home, a set of wine glasses from Pottery Barn, some throw pillows that would match the color scheme I'd imagined for our living room. I kept them in a box under my bed, like some kind of hope chest for the future I thought was just around the corner. The intimacy between us felt electric during those days. Trevor had this way of looking at me that made me feel beautiful and desired. Our connection was passionate, intense, the kind that made my coworkers tease me about my post-date glow the morning after our romantic evenings together. But then came that Tuesday in March that changed everything. I decided to surprise Trevor at his office. Johnson and Associates was supposedly working late on the Riverside development merger, and I thought bringing him dinner from Tony's Deli, his favorite Italian sub, would be a sweet gesture. The office building was mostly dark when I arrived at 8 p.m. Strange, for a company supposedly pulling all-nighters. I took the elevator to the 7th floor, my heels clicking against the marble lobby as I walked toward the reception area. That's when I heard it. Laughter. Familiar laughter coming from the conference room. But it wasn't just Trevor's laugh. It was a woman's voice too. Light, flirty, intimate in a way that made my blood run cold. I should have walked away then. Should have turned around, gone home, and confronted him the next day like a rational adult. But something compelled me forward, my heart hammering against my ribs as I crept closer to that conference room. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see them. Trevor. My Trevor. With a stunning blonde woman pressed against the conference table, her skirt hiked up, his hands tangled in her hair as they kissed with a passion I thought belonged only to us. The bag containing his favorite sandwich slipped from my hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud. But what I discovered next would make this betrayal look like child's play. I stood frozen in that hallway for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, watching my world crumble through a crack in a door. The woman wasn't just some random colleague, I recognized her. Vanessa Cole, the new senior account manager who'd joined Johnson & Associates 6 months ago. 6 months. At the same time, Trevor started working late nights. My hands were shaking as I backed away from the door, my mind racing to piece together all the lies. Every canceled date, every rushed phone call, every time he'd come home smelling like unfamiliar perfume that he claimed was from the elevator or a client meeting. I made it to my car somehow, tears streaming down my face as I sat in the parking garage. My phone buzzed, a text from Trevor. Working super late tonight, babe. Don't wait up. Love you, red heart. The audacity. The absolute, unbelievable audacity. But I didn't confront him that night. Something inside me knew I needed more than just what I'd witnessed. I needed the whole truth. I drove home to my apartment, poured myself a large glass of wine, and did something I never thought I'd do. I started investigating my own boyfriend. It started innocently enough. I logged into our shared Netflix account and noticed he'd been watching shows I'd never heard of, romantic comedies and series that definitely weren't his style. Shows watched at times when he told me he was working. Then I remembered his laptop. Trevor often left it at my place when he stayed over, and he'd never changed his password from our 6-month anniversary date. I felt sick doing it, but I opened that laptop and started digging. What I found was so much worse than one affair. Vanessa wasn't the first. There were message threads going back over a year, different women, different stories, but the same pattern. Late-night conversations that started professional and quickly turned personal. Photos I definitely wasn't meant to see. Plans made at restaurants I'd never been to, weekend trips explained away as guys' weekends or work conferences. But the worst part? He'd been telling them all the same lies he told me. The same romantic gestures, the same promises, the same future plans. I found an email draft to someone named Bridget where he was literally copy-pasting the same, "I've never felt this way about anyone" paragraph he'd sent to me months earlier. I was just one name on a very long list. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through months of deception. There were receipts from lingerie stores, items I'd never received. Hotel reservations for romantic getaways that had supposedly been cancelled due to work emergencies. Credit card statements showing dinners at expensive restaurants on nights he'd claimed to be eating takeout at the office. The man I thought I knew didn't exist. Trevor Harrison was a professional liar, and I'd been his most gullible victim. I spent the entire night going through everything, taking screenshots, and building a timeline of his betrayals. By sunrise, I had a digital folder filled with 2 years' worth of evidence that our entire relationship had been built on deception. But here's the thing about discovering you've been played for a fool: it doesn't just make you sad. After the initial heartbreak, it makes you angry. Really, really angry. Trevor texted me the next morning with his usual "good morning beautiful" message, complete with heart emojis and promises to make up for missing our dinner plans. I stared at that text for a long time, thinking about the woman I'd been before I opened that laptop. That woman would have confronted him immediately, probably crying and screaming, demanding explanations that would only lead to more lies. She would have let him manipulate her into believing this was somehow her fault, that she hadn't been enough to keep him faithful. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Instead, I texted back, "Good morning, handsome. Can't wait to see you tonight. I have a surprise planned." Because I did have a surprise planned. Several of them, actually. I called in sick to work, the first time I'd ever used a personal day for something other than being actually ill. I had planned to do. First stop, Sophia's house. If I were going to execute the kind of revenge Trevor deserved, I needed my best friend's devious mind and her connections in this city. "Girl, you look terrible," Sophia said when she opened her door at 10 a.m., still in her silk pajamas. "What happened?" I held up my phone, showing her the folder of screenshots I'd compiled. "I need your help ruining someone's life." Sophia's eyes lit up with the kind of wicked glee that reminded me of why we'd been best friends since college. "Tell me everything." Little did I know that my plan for revenge would lead to the most unexpected twist of my entire life. Sophia's kitchen became our war room. We spread printouts across her granite countertop like generals planning a battle, fueled by strong coffee and righteous fury. "Okay, let me get this straight," Sophia said, adjusting her reading glasses as she studied Trevor's credit card statements. "This man has been running a full-scale operation. Multiple women, overlapping timelines, and he's financing it all while telling you he's saving for your future together." "Gets better," I said, pulling up his social media accounts on my laptop. "Look at this." I showed her Trevor's Instagram, carefully curated to look like the perfect boyfriend, but I now noticed how strategic every post was. Photos of us were always cropped or angled to hide identifying details. No couple photos at recognizable Phoenix landmarks. No tags at specific restaurants or locations we'd visited together. "He's been keeping you compartmentalized," Sophia realized. "Making sure none of his different worlds collide." "Exactly. And that gave me an idea. What if they did collide?" I asked slowly. "What if all his different worlds came crashing together at the same time?" Sophia's grin was positively diabolical. "I'm listening." "Here's what we discovered during our deep dive." Trevor had a pattern. He rotated between women on a schedule, Tuesday and Thursday nights with Vanessa, weekend afternoons with someone named Rachel who thought he was divorced, and sporadic lunches with at least 3 other women who believed they were in serious relationships with him. But his masterpiece of deception was his upcoming birthday party. Trevor had invited me to what he described as a small gathering with close friends, at Pinnacle Peak Country Club this Saturday. What he hadn't mentioned was that he'd also invited Vanessa, telling her it was a company networking event where I'd love to have you as my +1. "And Rachel?" She thought she was attending her boyfriend's birthday as his official girlfriend, finally getting to meet his friends after months of keeping things private while the divorce finalized. 3 women, 1 party, and a man who thought he was clever enough to juggle it all. "This is perfect," Sophia breathed. "But we need to make sure it's more than just an embarrassing confrontation. We need to make it count." That's when I remembered something crucial: Trevor's job. Johnson and Associates prided themselves on their family values company culture. Their website was full of rhetoric about trust, integrity, and ethical business practices. Trevor's boss, Mr. Hamilton, was old-school conservative and notoriously strict about employees who brought scandal to the company. What if his colleagues happened to witness his networking skills firsthand? I suggested. Sophia clapped her hands together. "Now you're thinking like a proper revenge queen." We spent the rest of the day crafting our plan. It had to be subtle enough that Trevor wouldn't see it coming, but devastating enough to ensure he faced real consequences for his actions. Phase 1: Information gathering. I would attend the party as his devoted girlfriend, playing my role perfectly while Sophia, armed with a hidden camera, documented everything as my friend who wanted to meet the famous Trevor. Phase 2: The reveal. At the right moment, when all 3 women and his colleagues were present, the truth would come out. But not from me. That would make me look like the crazy ex. No, this needed to look like Trevor's own web of lies naturally unraveling. Phase 3: The aftermath. Evidence of his deception would find its way to Mr. Hamilton's desk first thing Monday morning, along with documentation of how Trevor had been using company resources and time to maintain his multiple relationships. But Sophia had one more brilliant addition to our plan. "What's Trevor's biggest weakness?" she asked. "His ego," I answered immediately. "He thinks he's smarter than everyone else." "Exactly. So what if we made him think he was winning, right up until the moment everything collapsed?" She was right. Trevor's arrogance was his Achilles heel. He was so confident in his ability to manipulate people that he'd never suspect someone might be playing him for once. So I did something that felt completely foreign but absolutely necessary. I became an actress. That evening, when Trevor came over with flowers and apologies for his crazy work schedule, I played the role of devoted, trusting girlfriend perfectly. "I understand, baby," I said, accepting his kiss and the roses he'd probably bought with money from his Trevor's future home with Catalina savings account. "Your career is important. We have our whole lives ahead of us." He visibly relaxed, pulling me closer on my couch. "You're so understanding, Kat. I don't know what I did to deserve you." The irony was suffocating, but I smiled and melted into his embrace, letting him think he still had complete control over my emotions. "Actually," I said, tracing patterns on his chest, "I have an idea for your birthday party. What if we made it extra special?" Trevor thought he was getting the perfect girlfriend. Instead, he was walking straight into a trap 2 years in the making. The next few days were a masterclass in deception, except this time, I was the one pulling the strings. I threw myself into planning Trevor's perfect birthday party with an enthusiasm that made him beam with satisfaction. He had no idea I was designing his downfall with the same attention to detail I'd once put into planning our romantic dates. "I want everything to be perfect for you," I told him over dinner at Olive Garden Wednesday night, playing the adoring girlfriend role to perfection. "You've been working so hard lately, and you deserve something really special." Trevor reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm in that way that used to make my heart flutter. Now it just made my skin crawl. "You're incredible, Kat. Most women would be upset about all the overtime I've been putting in, but you're actually planning a party to celebrate me." If only he knew what I was really celebrating. Behind the scenes, Sophia and I had been busy. She'd used her connections in event planning to discover that Vanessa had called Pinnacle Peak Country Club, asking about appropriate attire for a corporate networking event this Saturday. Meanwhile, my investigation into Rachel revealed she'd posted on Facebook about finally meeting my boyfriend's friends at his birthday celebration. All the pieces were falling into place exactly as we'd hoped. But I needed insurance. Something that would guarantee Trevor couldn't talk his way out of this situation with his usual charm and lies. That's when I remembered his phone. Trevor had this habit of leaving his device unlocked when we were together, a sign of trust that I'd once found endearing. Now I saw it for what it really was, arrogance. He was so confident I'd never suspect anything that he'd become careless. Thursday evening, while he was in my shower, I quickly accessed his messages and forwarded key conversations to my own phone. Not just the romantic exchanges, but the logistical ones too. Messages coordinating with Vanessa about Saturday's networking event. Texts with Rachel about picking her up for my birthday party where you'll finally meet everyone important to me. But the most damning evidence was a group chat I discovered between Trevor and 2 of his buddies, Kyle and Brandon from his gym. "Kyle, dude, how are you managing 3 different chicks for your birthday?" Trevor, "It's all about compartmentalization, bro. Kat thinks it's intimate dinner with friends, Vanessa thinks it's work networking, Rachel thinks she's finally being introduced as the girlfriend. None of them will know what hit them face with tears of joy. Brandon, you're playing with fire, man. Trevor, please. These women are so wrapped around my finger, they'd believe anything I tell them. Kat especially, girl worships the ground I walk on." Reading those messages, I felt something shift inside me. The last traces of love I'd harbored for the man I thought Trevor was finally died, replaced by a cold, calculating determination to make him pay for every lie, every manipulation, every moment he'd made me feel like I wasn't enough. Friday night, Trevor stayed over at my apartment. He was unusually affectionate, probably feeling guilty about what he was planning to pull off the next evening. He brought my favorite Thai food from Bangkok Garden and a bottle of wine, setting up a romantic dinner on my balcony overlooking the city lights. "Tomorrow's going to be perfect," he said, pulling me onto his lap as we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Just you, me, and our closest friends celebrating another year of life." I nestled against his chest, letting him hold me close. "I can't wait to meet more of your work colleagues," I said innocently. "You've mentioned Vanessa so many times, I feel like I already know her." I felt his body tense slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Oh, she might not make it. You know how unpredictable work events can be." "That's too bad," I murmured. I was really looking forward to putting a face to the name. We made love that night with an intensity that surprised me. Not because I felt anything for him anymore, those feelings had died the moment I read his group chat, but because I knew it would be the last time. There was something almost ceremonial about it, like I was saying goodbye not just to Trevor, but to the naive woman I'd been before I discovered his betrayal. He fell asleep afterward with his arm around me, completely relaxed and confident. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and running through our plan one final time. By tomorrow night, Trevor Harrison's carefully constructed web of lies would be destroyed. His relationships, his job, his reputation, all of it would come crashing down in the most public way possible. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, I had no idea that my plan for revenge would end up revealing something about myself I never expected to discover. The stage was set, the players were in position, and Trevor had no clue he was about to star in the performance of a lifetime. Saturday evening arrived crisp and clear, one of those perfect Phoenix nights where the desert sky stretches endlessly in every direction. I spent extra time getting ready, choosing a stunning red dress that hugged my curves in all the right places, not for Trevor, but for my own confidence. Tonight, I needed to look and feel like a woman who couldn't be broken. Sophia arrived at my apartment an hour before we were supposed to leave, looking gorgeous in a black cocktail dress and carrying a small purse that concealed our secret weapon, a tiny camera that could stream directly to her phone. "You ready for this?" she asked, checking her lipstick in my hallway mirror. "I've been ready for 2 years," I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Trevor picked me up at 7:30 sharp, looking devastatingly handsome in a navy suit that I'd helped him pick out 3 months earlier. He kissed me softly when I answered the door, his cologne enveloping me in a scent that once meant comfort and now meant nothing but lies. "You look absolutely stunning, Kat," he said, his eyes traveling appreciatively over my red dress. "I'm going to be the luckiest man at this party." "You have no idea," I murmured, linking my arm through his. The drive to Pinnacle Peak Country Club was filled with Trevor's nervous chatter about the evening ahead. He was trying too hard to sound casual, dropping hints about how some people from work might show up, and how I shouldn't feel obligated to mingle if you'd rather stick with our friend group. Each word was another nail in his coffin, and he was hammering them in himself. We arrived to find the private dining room beautifully decorated. I'd spared no expense making sure Trevor's downfall would have an elegant backdrop. Soft lighting, cream-colored linens, and arrangements of white roses created the perfect setting for what was about to unfold. The first guests to arrive were Trevor's gym buddies Kyle and Brandon, along with a few college friends I recognized. They greeted me warmly, and I played the perfect hostess, making sure everyone had drinks and felt welcome. "Kat, you've outdone yourself," Kyle commented, accepting a glass of wine. "Trevor's a lucky guy." "Oh, I think we're both pretty lucky," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. At 8:15, my heart began racing as I spotted a familiar blonde figure entering the dining room. Vanessa Cole looked absolutely stunning in a professional but alluring blue dress, her hair swept into an elegant updo. She scanned the room uncertainly before her eyes landed on Trevor. I watched the color drain from his face as he realized his first mistake of the evening. He'd forgotten to mention to Vanessa that his networking event was actually taking place in the same room as his birthday party. But Trevor was nothing if not quick on his feet. I watched him excuse himself from our group and approach Vanessa with that charming smile of his. "Vanessa, so glad you could make it," I heard him say, though his voice carried a slight strain. Actually, we ended up combining the networking event with a small birthday celebration. "Hope that's okay." "Oh," she said, looking surprised but pleased. "I had no idea it was your birthday. I would have brought a gift." "Your presence is gift enough," he replied smoothly, and I had to admire his ability to lie so effortlessly even when his world was starting to collapse. Sophia caught my eye from across the room and nodded slightly. Her camera was rolling, capturing every moment of Trevor's growing panic as he tried to manage the situation. But we were just getting started. At 8:30, the dining room door opened again, and my breath caught as Rachel Martinez walked in. She was even more beautiful in person than in her social media photos. Long dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a figure that could stop traffic. She wore a stunning emerald green dress and carried a wrapped gift, clearly expecting to be welcomed as Trevor's girlfriend. The look of pure terror that crossed Trevor's face was almost worth 2 years of lies and heartbreak. Almost. Rachel's eyes swept the room, taking in the elegant decorations and well-dressed crowd, before landing on Trevor. Her face lit up with a radiant smile as she started walking toward him. That's when Trevor made his second critical mistake. He panicked. Instead of approaching Rachel calmly, he practically sprinted across the room, intercepting her near the entrance and speaking to her in urgent, hushed tones. His body language screamed guilt and desperation, and I could see several people starting to notice the strange interaction. "Is everything okay?" I heard Brandon ask Kyle. "Trevor looks like he's about to have a heart attack." Meanwhile, Vanessa had noticed Trevor's intense conversation with the beautiful brunette and was making her way over, professional curiosity evident on her face. This was it. The moment 2 years of planning and 3 women's lives were about to collide in spectacular fashion. But I had no idea that the explosion I was about to witness would be nothing compared to what was coming next. Time seemed to slow down as I watched Trevor's carefully constructed world begin to implode. From my position near the bar, I had the perfect view of the chaos about to unfold. Rachel was speaking animatedly to Trevor, clearly confused by his strange behavior. Even from across the room, I could see her saying something like, "What's wrong, honey?" while reaching out to touch his arm in that intimate way girlfriends do. Meanwhile, Vanessa had made it halfway across the room, her professional instincts clearly pinging that something wasn't quite right about the dynamic she was witnessing. And Trevor? Poor Trevor looked like a deer caught in headlights, his head swiveling between the 2 women approaching his position like some kind of panicked predator realizing he was outnumbered. "This is better than reality TV," Sophia whispered in my ear, discreetly adjusting her purse to get the best angle for recording. But the real showstopper was about to begin. "Trevor," I called out in my sweetest voice, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Come here, birthday boy. I want to introduce you to everyone properly." Every head in the room turned toward me, including Rachel's and Vanessa's. Trevor's eyes went wide with something approaching terror, but he was trapped. With the entire party watching, he had no choice but to comply. "Actually," I continued, walking toward the center of the room with confident steps, "why don't we all gather around? I have a special birthday surprise for my amazing boyfriend." The word boyfriend hit both Rachel and Vanessa like physical blows. I watched Rachel's face crumble in confusion, while Vanessa's expression shifted from professional courtesy to sharp suspicion. "Kat," Trevor said desperately, "maybe we should." "Oh no," I interrupted, my voice still sweet as honey but my eyes hard as steel. "Everyone needs to hear this. You see, I've been planning something very special for Trevor's birthday. Something that celebrates just how unique he really is. By now, the entire room was focused on us. Trevor's friends, his colleagues from Johnson & Associates who had arrived fashionably late, Rachel, Vanessa, and the handful of other guests all formed a circle around us like we were about to witness some romantic grand gesture. If only they knew. Trevor Harrison, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet room, is truly one of a kind. In fact, he's so special that he has this amazing ability to make multiple women feel like they're the only one in his life. I heard someone gasp, I think it was Rachel, but I kept going. For instance, I continued, pulling out my phone and opening the screenshots I'd prepared. He can tell his girlfriend Catalina that they're planning a future together, while simultaneously promising his co-worker Vanessa that she's the woman he's been waiting for his whole life. Vanessa's face went white. What are you talking about? She asked, but her voice was shaky, like she already knew. Oh, and let's not forget Rachel, I said, turning to face the beautiful brunette who was now staring at Trevor with dawning horror. The woman he's been telling for months that he's getting divorced and can't wait to start a new life with. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the soft jazz music playing from the speakers, the distant clink of glasses from the bar, but everyone in our circle was frozen. Cat, please, Trevor finally found his voice, but it came out as a croak. You're misunderstanding. Am I? I asked, holding up my phone. Because I have text messages, emails, credit card statements, and hotel reservations that say otherwise. Would you like me to read some of them aloud? That's when Rachel found her voice. Trevor, she said, her tone dangerously low, what is she talking about? Who is this woman? Before Trevor could answer, Vanessa stepped forward, her professional composure cracking. He told me they broke up months ago, she said, looking at me with a mixture of anger and confusion. He said you were just a clingy ex who couldn't let go. The insult hit exactly as I'd expected it would, and I felt that familiar surge of rage that had been driving me for the past week. But instead of exploding, I smiled. How interesting, I said calmly. Because he told me that Vanessa was just a work colleague and that Rachel was a client he was helping through a difficult divorce. I turned to address the entire room now, my voice carrying with theatrical precision. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Trevor Harrison, a man so talented at multitasking that he can maintain serious relationships with 3 different women simultaneously, all while convincing each of us that we're the love of his life. The explosion that followed was everything I dreamed it would be and more. But what happened next would change not just Trevor's life, but mine in ways I never could have imagined. The aftermath of my revelation was like watching a carefully orchestrated symphony of chaos unfold in real time. Rachel was the first to find her voice, and when she did, it came out as a roar that could probably be heard in the country club's main dining room. Are you kidding me? She screamed, wheeling on Trevor with fury blazing in her dark eyes. 6 months, Trevor. 6 months of, I can't introduce you to my friends until the divorce is final. 6 months of sneaking around because you said your ex-wife was vindictive. Trevor raised his hands defensively, his face cycling through emotions faster than a slot machine. Fear, guilt, desperation, and finally, that manipulative charm he always fell back on when cornered. Rachel, baby, please let me explain. Don't you dare baby me, she shrieked, and I had to admire her rage. It was pure and righteous and everything I'd felt but been too controlled to express. Meanwhile, Vanessa had gone deadly quiet, which somehow seemed more terrifying than Rachel's shouting. She stood perfectly still, her blue eyes calculating as she processed the full scope of Trevor's deception. The Pittsburgh conference, she said suddenly, her voice cutting through Rachel's continued tirade. You said you couldn't go because of a family emergency. Trevor's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Vanessa, I can explain that. You went with her, didn't you? Vanessa nodded toward me, pieces clicking into place. The weekend you said your grandmother was in the hospital. You went to Sedona with your girlfriend. Oh, he took you to Sedona too? Rachel spun around to face me, her anger temporarily redirected. The place he said was our special spot, that he'd never shared with anyone else? I couldn't help but laugh, a sound that came out harder and more bitter than I'd intended. Sedona, Flagstaff, that little bed and breakfast in Jerome. Apparently Trevor has a whole catalogue of special places he's never shared with anyone else. That's when Brandon, one of Trevor's gym buddies, made the mistake of trying to lighten the mood. Dude, he said with an uncomfortable chuckle, you really stepped in it this time. 3 pairs of female eyes turned toward him with laser focus, and I saw him physically recoil. This time? Vanessa asked, her voice dangerously soft. This time. Brandon's face went pale as he realized his error, but Kyle, apparently not reading the room at all, decided to make things worse. Come on, everyone knows Trevor's always been a player. We just figured you ladies knew what you were getting into. The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear my own heartbeat. Then Rachel picked up her wine glass and threw it at Trevor's head. He ducked, but not fast enough. The red wine splashed across his expensive navy suit and onto the white tablecloth behind him. The glass shattered against the wall, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. You son of a... Rachel started forward, but Sophia caught her arm. Ladies, Sophia said loudly, her voice cutting through the chaos, might I suggest we let Trevor explain himself? I'm sure he has some fascinating insights into how he managed this impressive juggling act. All eyes turned back to Trevor, who looked like he was seriously considering making a run for the emergency exit. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie askew, and his wine-stained suit gave him the appearance of a man who'd just survived a bar fight. It's not what it looks like, he said weakly, which might have been the worst possible thing he could have said. Really? I asked, my voice deceptively calm. Because it looks like you've been lying to 3 different women for months, using each of us for whatever you needed at the time while promising all of us a future you never intended to deliver. And using company resources to do it, Vanessa added coldly. I saw her glance toward Mr. Hamilton, who had been standing near the bar looking increasingly uncomfortable as the scene unfolded. That's when I realized we had an audience beyond just the party guests. The country club staff had started gathering in the doorway, probably wondering if they needed to call security. A few other diners from the main restaurant had wandered over to see what the commotion was about. Trevor's public humiliation was complete, but I wasn't finished. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a manila envelope, I have one more birthday surprise for you, Trevor. His eyes widened in horror as he recognized what I was holding. Copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. The text messages, the credit card statements, the hotel receipts, the emails to multiple women using identical romantic language. What is that? Mr. Hamilton asked, stepping forward with the kind of authoritative presence that made it clear why he ran Johnson and Associates. Evidence of how your employee has been conducting his personal life, I replied, handing the envelope directly to Trevor's boss. Including documentation of how he's been using company time, company resources, and company events to maintain multiple relationships built on lies. Trevor lunged forward, trying to grab the envelope, but it was too late. Mr. Hamilton had already opened it and was scanning the first page, a timeline I'd created showing Trevor's overlapping relationships mapped against his work schedule. This shows you were supposed to be in client meetings during times you were. Mr. Hamilton's voice trailed off as he read further. Having romantic lunches with women who weren't his girlfriend, I finished helpfully. Using the company credit card to pay for hotels and dinners that were supposedly business expenses. The color drained completely from Trevor's face. Sir, I can explain. No, Mr. Hamilton said firmly, closing the envelope. I think you've explained enough for one evening. We'll be discussing this first thing Monday morning. But the real knockout punch came from an unexpected source. Rachel had been quietly scrolling through her phone during the confrontation, and suddenly she looked up with an expression of pure venom. "Trevor," she said sweetly, "you might want to check your social media." Trevor fumbled for his phone with shaking hands, and I watched his face go from pale to green as he saw what Rachel had done. She'd tagged him in a Facebook post that was already gaining traction. "Ladies of Phoenix, meet Trevor Harrison, professional liar and cheater. This man is currently juggling at least 3 women with the same promises and lies. Consider this your public service announcement. #PhoenixBlair, #cheater, #exposed. You can't do this," Trevor said desperately. "This is defamation." "Is it?" Rachel asked innocently. "Because everything I posted is true. You are juggling multiple women. You did lie to all of us. And the screenshots I included are your actual words." I pulled out my own phone and saw that the post was already being shared by Rachel's friends, then their friends, spreading through Phoenix's social media networks like wildfire. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Vanessa, who had been quiet throughout most of the confrontation, suddenly started laughing. Not the bitter laugh of a woman scorned, but genuine, incredulous laughter. "You know what's funny?" she said, looking directly at Trevor. "I actually feel sorry for you." We all stared at her in surprise. "I mean, think about it," she continued. "This man is so fundamentally broken, so incapable of genuine connection, that he had to create elaborate lies just to experience something resembling love. 3 women loved him, really loved him, and he threw it all away because he was too much of a coward to choose." Her words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. And suddenly, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't angry anymore. Looking at Trevor standing there in his wine-stained suit, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies, I felt nothing. No rage, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just a profound sense of emptiness where all that fury had been living for the past week. "You know what the really sad part is?" I said, my voice suddenly calm. "I actually loved you. The real you, whoever that is underneath all the lies. And you'll never know what that feels like, will you?" Trevor looked at me with something that might have been regret, but it was too late for regrets. But as I walked away from the wreckage of Trevor's life, I had no idea that the most unexpected chapter of my story was about to begin. 3 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix, finally feeling like myself again for the first time since that night at Pinnacle Peak Country Club. The aftermath of Trevor's spectacular downfall had been everything I'd hoped for and more, but the real surprise was how quickly I'd stopped caring about his destruction once it was complete. Trevor had been fired from Johnson & Associates within 48 hours of the party. Mr. Hamilton didn't appreciate discovering that his company's reputation had been damaged by an employee using corporate resources to fund his cheating lifestyle. The story had spread through Phoenix's professional networks faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Rachel's Facebook post had gone viral locally, turning Trevor into a cautionary tale that women across the city shared as a warning to their friends. Last I heard, he'd moved back to his hometown somewhere in Ohio, probably to escape the social media infamy that followed him everywhere in Phoenix. But the most unexpected outcome of my revenge plot wasn't Trevor's downfall. It was meeting someone who would change my entire perspective on love, trust, and second chances. Her name was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, and she was the crisis counselor Pinnacle Peak Country Club had called when 3 women having simultaneous breakdowns in their dining room had created what the manager diplomatically called an unusual situation. I remembered her arriving that night in the aftermath of the confrontation, when Rachel was crying angry tears, Vanessa was stress-eating breadsticks while planning Trevor's professional demise, and I was sitting in stunned silence, wondering why my moment of triumph felt so hollow. "Are you ladies all right?" Dr. Rodriguez had asked, her voice carrying the kind of warmth that made you want to trust her immediately. I'm Elena, and I specialize in helping people process relationship trauma. We don't need therapy, I'd said defensively. We need a lawyer and a social media manager. Elena had smiled at that, not condescendingly, but with genuine understanding. Sometimes revenge feels like justice, but it doesn't always feel like healing. At the time, I dismissed her words. I was riding high on adrenaline and vindication, convinced that watching Trevor's world crumble was exactly the closure I needed. But in the weeks that followed, as the initial satisfaction wore off, I found myself thinking about what she'd said. The anger that had driven me for so long was gone, but it hadn't been replaced by peace. Instead, I felt empty. Like I'd spent so much energy planning Trevor's destruction that I'd forgotten to plan my own healing. That's when I'd called Elena's office and made an appointment. I think I might need that therapy after all, I told her receptionist. Working with Elena had been unlike anything I'd expected. She didn't judge me for the elaborate revenge plot, didn't lecture me about taking the high road. Instead, she helped me understand why I'd felt the need to destroy Trevor so completely, and what that said about my own relationship with self-worth and trust. You orchestrated his downfall because you needed to feel powerful again, she'd explained during one of our sessions. Trevor had made you feel foolish and powerless, so you created a scenario where you held all the cards. And it worked, I'd replied. He got what he deserved. Maybe, Elena had agreed. But did you get what you needed? That question had haunted me for weeks, because the honest answer was no. Destroying Trevor hadn't healed the part of me that had been broken by his betrayal. It had just temporarily masked the pain with the satisfaction of revenge. But today, sitting in this coffee shop, I finally felt like I could answer Elena's question differently. I'd gotten something I needed, but not from revenge. I'd gotten it from the months of therapy that followed, from learning to trust my own instincts again, from rebuilding my sense of self-worth on something more solid than someone else's opinion of me. I'd also gotten something I hadn't expected, a profound friendship with both Rachel and Vanessa. We'd started meeting for coffee a few weeks after the party, initially just to compare notes and make sure our stories were straight for the various professional and social consequences of Trevor's exposure. But somewhere along the way, we'd realized we actually liked each other. You know what's crazy? Rachel had said during one of our early meetings. I think we have more in common than any of us had with Trevor. She was right. We were all strong, intelligent, successful women who had somehow allowed ourselves to be manipulated by a man whose greatest talent was recognizing and exploiting our individual vulnerabilities. Vanessa, it turned out, had been recovering from a difficult divorce when she met Trevor. He'd positioned himself as the stable, trustworthy alternative to her chaotic marriage. Rachel had been struggling with loneliness after moving to Phoenix for a new job, and Trevor had promised to be her connection to the city and its social scene. And me? I'd been so focused on building the perfect relationship that I'd ignored every red flag in favor of preserving my fantasy of our future together. We weren't stupid, Vanessa had said one afternoon as we sat by her pool, sharing stories and wine. We were human. And he was a predator who knew exactly how to exploit basic human needs for connection and love. As I finished my latte and prepared to leave the coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a text message that made me smile. Elena, how are you feeling about the book proposal meeting tomorrow? Right. Tomorrow I was meeting with a publisher who wanted to turn my story into a self-help book about recognizing and recovering from manipulative relationships. The working title was The Revenge That Taught Me Self-Love, and I was nervous and excited in equal measure. I typed back, ready to help other women avoid my mistakes. And maybe learn from my successes too. Because that was the real ending to my revenge story. Not Trevor's downfall, though that had been spectacular. Not the viral social media exposure, though that had been satisfying. The real ending was learning that the best revenge against someone who makes you feel small is becoming someone who can never be diminished by another person's actions. Trevor had taught me what I wouldn't accept in a relationship. Elena had taught me what I deserved. And Rachel, Vanessa, and I had taught each other that sometimes the most unexpected friendships come from shared experiences of betrayal and recovery. As I walked out into the Phoenix sunshine, I realized I hadn't thought about Trevor in weeks. He'd become irrelevant to my story, which was exactly as it should be. My revenge was complete, but more importantly, my healing had begun. And that was a much better ending than I'd ever planned. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone else's life, it's building your own so strong that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. Trevor thought he was playing 3 women, but in the end, he gave us the greatest gift possible. He showed us exactly who we were when we stopped being victims and started being warriors.